Welcome back, dear viewers. You're still watching Nile TV, Nile Cruise on Nile TV, dear viewers. And in this amazing segment, we have with us, dear viewers, through the long history of Cairo, the city has received many nicknames: the Conqueror, the Victorious, the City of a Thousand Minarets, and now a new addition to the list, which is the capital of the Islamic culture in 2020. The Ministry of Culture launched a culture and artistic program celebrating the Egyptian capital as the capital of the Islamic culture. Every function of the ministry is working hard to create a new culture program with an entire year of celebration in the city. The celebrations, dear viewers, aims include spreading the Islamic culture and reviving the culture messages by highlighting the glories of the chosen cities, also spreading the values of coexistence globally. Dear viewers, in this context, we have with us Hisham Essaawy, and it's a very good day to have you with us. And his title is an interdisciplinary designer and mentor as well. A very good day, sir.
Thank you, Rana.
Good day to you, Hisham. Now,
Thank you,
to
Hannah.
begin with, what is interdisciplinary design?
Okay, well, actually, trends now in design is a bit different than the ordinary ones. So you have to have a lot of backgrounds in order to be a good designer. So, for example, you can be an architect, you can be an interior designer, product designer, having a lot of studies behind this kind of profession in order to be, they call it like T-personnel designer instead of I-personnel designer. I-personnel designer is the designer that is working regarding the ordinary way of learning design. So like graduating from the architecture school and then be a professional architect and so on. On the other hand, the T-personnel designer who is working with different disciplinary or multidisciplinary backgrounds like art, like graphics, like fashion, like trends, CMF, colors, materials and finishes, a lot of backgrounds in order to be different designer, having a huge background in order to be better designer.
Okay, I believe that Cairo is very convenient for this type of art because Cairo has been exposed, Egypt in general, but Cairo in particular has been exposed to various cultures and therefore various designs, the Islamic, the Coptic, the modern.
Yes.
And if we're talking about architecture in particular, if we go downtown, we would find that there are certain parts of downtown Cairo that are an exact copy of downtown Paris.
Yeah.
With the same design in everything.
In an Egyptian way.
In an Egyptian
Yes.
way. And that's the whole idea behind interdisciplinary.
Exactly.
So you get the design of other parts of the world and
with
you
the
combine
essence
it with your
of
own.
the Egyptian way. Yes,
Yeah, so
exactly.
tell us more.
Yes.
So tell us more about that.
So, exactly as you said, Egypt has its own unique character. Features and characteristics and everything. So from beginning, from the ancient Egyptians, and then we became a cosmopolitan. So starting from the Greeks, starting from the Romans, and then after a while with the Coptic era, and then the Islamic era. Even the Islamic era, when we're talking about the architecture, we're having different significant styles in Egypt called Islamic architecture. So we're having Fatimid architecture, which is totally different than the Mamluki era, which is different than the Ottoman era, and each one is Egyptian in its soul. So having its own characteristics. So that's why it's very interesting. In the mid-20th century, when the architects, the Egyptian architects went to Europe to learn architecture, and they came back and they built the downtown, the old downtown. You can see the downtown is built like Europe, like Rome, like Paris, but with its essence of Egyptian architecture. For example, we're having a very famous style called Art Deco. So Art Deco is an American style that launched in the mid-20th century.
In Arabic we say Art Deco.
Yes, we can say a lot of this. Like when we're talking about the Empire style or the Empire style, when you're talking with the carpenters, you have to tell them Empire instead of Empire or Empire. Yes, you're right. So that's why we're having a lot of significant characteristics. We can talk a lot about these characteristics that influenced the designers not to let go the Egyptian essence and depending only on the Western styles. No, we mixed them all and became interdisciplinary, as you're saying. Exactly.
Okay, Hisham, of course, why was Cairo chosen as a capital of Islamic culture from your own perspective? I want your own perspective. Of course,
Okay.
they chose it.
Yes.
I want your perspective.
Yes, I don't want to defend this, but I believe this should be from beginning because we're having.
Definitely, you're
Y-
not defending, of
yeah,
course.
exactly. But the thing is, we're having the most beautiful styles. This is not my say, but all over the world we have the most beautiful styles, especially when we're talking about the Mamluki style. So, firstly, the Fatimid style. When the Fatimid era starts, they used the Egyptian craftsmen in order to make this kind of new buildings, which mainly were mosques, and of course Al Azhar is one of them. And you can see this unique perception that I have to say it a bit in Arabic because the Fatimid used the word of the best when they're calling this architecture project. For example, Al Azhar means the best. It's called صيغة أفعل تفضيل, or it's the best. So another monument, it's called Al Aqmar. It's also the best. So they were using this in order to seek perfection in their work. We invented a lot of new motifs, and we used Arabic calligraphy as the crown of the architecture. It's always on the top. And the Arabic calligraphy, they used Kufi calligraphy. But when we're talking about the Mamluki era, after a while, it's one of the most generous and most beautiful styles because these Mamluks came from Eastern Europe. Of course, that time Egypt was an empire. And that empire were bringing a lot of followers from all over the Islamic world that time, which were like Kazakhstan and other countries in the Eastern Europe were also Muslims.
Albania also.
Albania and some of the Slavics countries, the Commonwealth of the former USSR.
Yeah.
So they brought them, and these young guys who became later on leaders, these young guys were having this fresh look or this fresh eye of the Eastern Europe. So Eastern European minds came to Egypt and raised in Egypt, and then they started to think how to build. So that's why it was a huge interdisciplinary way of thinking. So they built the beautiful Mamluki styles, which were,
especially in Shara al-Mu'izz,
of course,
Street. It's
Mu'izz Street was
the ultimate
yes,
demonstration
exactly,
of that
exactly. From the Fatimid era, it was the best place to demonstrate your work. So
Yes.
it's all over the Islamic heritage. They started with Mu'izz Street, and then any new era or any new sculpture or architecture style or anyone who wants to make a new project, he has to put it in Mu'izz Street because it's the best the best place to do this. So in Mu'izz Street you can see the Mamluki styles, which was also inspired from the medieval styles in Europe, because at that time Mamluks were fighting the Crusades with Europe, and we had this kind of interaction with the European style. So you can see in Qalaoun complex in my street, for example, you can see these famous Gothic windows inside Islamic architecture. So that was a bit weird, but it's not weird because everyone...
Interdisciplinary
It's
again.
interdisciplinary again, and also it was a cosmopolitan way of thinking. We're having the same lifestyle like Europe that time. Egypt was very, very powerful that time. So that's why we were acting as if any other European country, with the mixture or with the essence of the Islamic architecture that time. So that's why it was very generous and very unique.
Okay, I believe that a huge mix of styles and
Yes.
cultures, and it has been affected by so many other
100%.
backgrounds. But as you
100%.
mentioned, keeping its own essence, and that's
Yes.
why it is very unique.
Yes.
And we're talking about arts in general, and specifically parts or artistic parts that were introduced to architecture.
Yep.
Such as arabesque, for example, or mashrabiya,
Yeah.
and how they use this in their buildings, and it's becoming
Sure.
again, it's coming back again
Okay.
as as a hit, you know,
Yes, you're right.
in so many areas. Also, the old styles of the European styles, again,
Yeah.
they were very much famous in all districts of Cairo, such as Abbasiyya, Ramses
Yes.
area, all these buildings, downtown again. And then they disappeared in the 70s and
Yeah.
80s, and they came back again
Yes.
in so many areas, new
Yes.
areas. How do you see that?
Let's start with Mashrabiyya, of course,
Okay.
because I like this part because Mashrabiyya, we're calling Mashrabiyya, we're thinking about Mashrabiyya as a part of the Islamic art or Islamic handcrafts.
It had a
So-
function back then.
Of course, but actually the surprise is Mashrabiyya is since the ancient Egyptians. The same Mashrabiyya, the same function. It's for Egyptians to protect them from the heat, of course, and you know the whole story. But it's starts with the ancient Egyptians, and then it was developed. Actually, it's called technically it's not Arabesque, it's not Mashrabiyya. It's turned wood. So we use turner in order to make these small pieces of wood and collect them together and make this kind of shade. So the ancient Egyptians started this, and we're having in the old Egyptian museum, we have some samples of the old Mashrabiyya. It's there. And then in the Coptic era, it was developed with the current style of Mashrabiyya that we know now. So if you're going to see the Coptic museum, it's very, very interesting place, and the facade is made also, and this is really ironic, is inspired from the Al Aqmar Mosque. Imagine the Coptic Museum is inspired from Al Aqmar Mosque. So that gives you a glimpse about how things are mixed together. So when you're
In a very
seeing,
unique way.
yeah, in a very unique way. So when you're seeing the Mashrabiyya in Coptic Museum, it's the same Mashrabiyya that we're using, and you can see when they putting these small pieces of wood, when the light goes on it, it will draw the shade of a Coptic cross. So when the Arabs came to Egypt, they used the same function exactly as is, but they added a small bits and pieces into the Mashrabiyya in order not to make it making the Coptic cross shade, but to make some kind of other calligraphy or other unique artworks inside Mashrabiyya. But they use it exactly as the same way. And Mashrabiyya, the right name is not Mashrabiyya, it's called Mashrafiyya. It's like a balcony. And the mashrabiyya is a small piece that we put the old olla or the jar that we drink water from it. So that's why it's now we're calling it, of course, mashrabiyya, but it has this significant story. So it gives you all the background of how it's totally Egyptian all over the eras.
How do the architectural themes from different civilizations combine in the same monuments in Egypt?
Okay, that's really interesting question. So, okay. During all of these eras, Egypt developed its own characteristic, or actually own character in architecture. So, with each new era, we're gaining more experience. Sometimes we let go some old. Egypt is always up to date. So when you were talking about the architecture in Egypt in the 70s, there was a huge revolution in architecture and design in the beginning of 20th century all over the world. It was headed by Bauhaus school because at that time people started to think why we're so interested about the details without having the function. So because basically before that, design was serving the aristocratic people and the wealthy people, and we're not thinking about the other people. So after the beginning of the new 20th century, and after the end of the First World War and the Second World War, we started to think more about people, normal people, and the concept of designocracy, which is the democracy of design, started to appear everywhere. So that's why we started to focus on architecture style that has a purpose and designs that have a purpose instead of having just ornaments and details and some kind of decorations. So all of these eras, it was developing into a new method, which is form follows function, or to serve people more, not to make useless details or useless decorations in the design itself.
Okay. But again, throughout Egypt, we would find different styles, not only for the rich people, but for the
Yes.
poor people. If we go to the Nubian part,
Yep.
for example, in Upper Egypt and Aswan, you would find colorful houses, beautifully built, and
Yes.
that inspired Hassan Fathi in
Exactly.
his famous architectural style. And then if you go up north, you would find Alexandria, how it was affected by the Roman and Greek
Yes.
styles. And Cairo has everything,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
in between. Cairo is the city, it's the capital, so it has to adapt to a more modern style
Yeah,
of
right.
architecture. I believe that this had its good and bad impacts as well
Yes.
on styles and on the general tastes
Yes.
in arts. How do you see that?
It depends on the perception that you're seeing it. Exactly like what we're having now in music and arts, as you can see. If you're a bit conservative, you will see this like it's not a proper thing to sing those new songs or to see these new trends exactly in the architecture. It's the same thing. So if you're having a conservative perspective, you will see this modern trends as it's something that is artificial or totally inappropriate. You cannot do this. But if you're thinking like the new millennials, the new generations, you will see that this actually is representing your generation or your soul. So it depends. But I believe that, and this is what we're seeing in history of Egypt exactly, that Egypt is always renovated and always renewing its own styles and own soul automatically. So let's just accept that there are differences. Like Egypt is always accepting this. So we were always cosmopolitan background. We're always thinking like we're giving a chance for everyone to express himself. So why we don't do this? This is generosity instead of banning things. It's not. I think from my perspective, is not the right way. And if you're expressing or making everyone expressing themselves through design or architecture, then let the strong survive. Let the better survive. So this is my perception.
Okay.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's 5 p.m. Cairo local time, and this is a quick look at our latest top stories. Health Ministry delegation led by Minister Hala Zaid arrived back home after a nearly a week-long visit to China. The arriving delegation went through medical checks and precautionary measures by a quarantine team. As 14 days of full observation, the incubation period of the virus will follow. During her visit, the Minister of Health conveyed a message of solidarity from President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to China, and she also provided the Asian country preventive supplies. Saudi Arabia State Television said that the state reopened Al-Haram al-Sharif Mosque in Mecca and Al-Masjid al-Nabawi in Al-Madinah al-Munawwara after they were closed for sterilization to halt the spread of the new coronavirus. Meanwhile, the city of Bethlehem or Beit Lahm was on lockdown Friday after the first Palestinian cases of the deadly coronavirus were discovered there. The Palestinian government announced a month-long state of emergency after the 7 cases were identified, while the Israeli Defense Ministry said it had imposed emergency measures on Beit Lahm, with all people forbidden from entering or leaving the city. Egyptian and French naval forces carried out the first stage of military drills in the Mediterranean. Gamal Abdel Nasser helicopter carrier, which includes a multitask frigate, took part in the drills, in addition to other elements of the naval special forces. The exercises aim to enhance the maritime security in the Mediterranean, as well as exchanging expertise between the Egyptian and French naval forces. The second stage is expected to take place in the Red Sea Theater. An attacker targeted the U.S. Embassy in the Tunisian capital on Friday, causing an explosion and injuries among police before being killed. The assailant tried to enter the embassy but was prevented by police who guarded the diplomatic mission in the Berge du Lac district. Police officials said
Several police were wounded in the attack, adding that the operation was doomed to fail. Police said the attacker had been riding a motorcycle. Finally, EU countries on Friday gave a cautious welcome to a Russian-Turkish ceasefire in Syria as a sign of goodwill, but urged the warring parties to allow in more humanitarian aid. Foreign ministers from the 27 EU states are meeting for talks in Zagreb on the crisis in Syria's northwestern Idlib province, where Ankara is battling Moscow-backed government forces. Ceasefire came into force at midnight, aiming to halt intense fighting that has sparked a humanitarian crisis. That's all we have for now. Stay tuned on Nile TV International always for more updates. And for more details, please log on to www.nileinternational.net. Many thanks for watching. This is Nermeen Abdurrahman signing off.
تحية تقدير خاصة للمرأة المصرية العظيمة، بنات وسيدات النيل وصانعات السعادة والنماء، عظيمات مصر. إن تطور ورقي أي مجتمع إنما يقاس بدرجة تطوره الثقافي والأخلاقي والمعرفي، ويرتبط ارتباطا وثيقا بتطور ثقافة ووعي المرأة ومساهماتها الفاعلة في بناء المجتمع وتنميته. تستمر مسيرة كفاح المرأة لتحصل على حق الانتخاب وممارسة الحقوق السياسية كاملة، وقبل ذلك الحق في التعليم وشغل أي من المناصب والوظائف العامة، وصولا لهذا اليوم الذي نرى فيه المرأة في جميع ميادين العمل الوطني. إن المرأة المصرية أثبتت جيلا بعد جيل وعلى مدار التاريخ المصري الطويل أنها طرف أساسي في معادلة الوطن.
اليوم الدولي للمرأة 8 مارس.
Leftmost monuments in Cairo.
Okay, well, in Cairo, we're having, of course, the ancient Egyptian monuments, but also the Islamic monuments in Cairo are very famous because and huge. Especially, it's all collected in very tiny, small area. So you can find, for example, in Sharmais, which is the area of 6 kilometers. It's just 6 kilometers. You can find the 3 main styles of Islamic architecture, the main 3 styles on these in this place. Because when Amr ibn al-As started to enter Egypt, and they started to make the first capital of Islamic Egypt in Fustat, and then after it Al-Qata' and Al-Askar by Ahmed ibn Tulun, and after that the Fatimid came and made Cairo. It was always in the same area, because at that time, before of course Cairo, that time the capital of Egypt was Alexandria by the Romans. So this was the main place that collected all of the Islamic architecture at that time. After a while, of course, it went spread all over Egypt and Upper Egypt and Alexandria. But Islamic architecture is really condensed in the area of the Mu'izz Street. I think it's very beautiful to see all of this combination of different styles there.
Okay. Since Cairo was chosen as the capital of Islamic culture 2020, and the Ministry of Culture has launched a special program throughout the year to showcase Cairo with all its Islamic history in particular, and its Islamic heritage, which is also variable, as you mentioned, between the Fatima, the Ayyuban, the Mamluk, and so on and so forth. So, in your opinion, how can we show the world Cairo as the Islamic culture, but still making people want to see more about Cairo.
Yeah.
We want people to come to Cairo not just to see the pyramids or go to the museum, but
Yes.
see its very important aspect, its
Yeah.
Islamic aspect as well.
Actually, this is really interesting because we do something like this. It's informal, of course, but we do for architecture students and some of my students who are interested in design or architecture style. So we're giving them this kind of culture tour. It's in Moaz Street, and we take them through the timeline. Started from the beginning of Cairo, and then the Fatimid era, and then we go through. It's all in the same place, so it's really easy to go through the whole place. So and then to go to the Mamluki era, and then the Ottoman era in the same street of Moaz Street. So focusing on Moaz Street as a cultural tours, I think it will be very beneficial for tourists, but of course to give them this kind of architectural slash cultural tour, not just this kind of entertainment tour. So because we're having a lot of history there. When I'm bringing my students and they tell me we went to my street several times, but we didn't know all of these details about Barqoq Mosque, about the complex of Qalawun, about the famous mosque of Nasr Muhammad ibn Qalawun, the son of Qalawun, who brought a whole facade of a church in Damascus in order to show off that he's ruling Egypt from Egypt and Damascus and Sudan, and he was just trying to prove or show off his way,
power.
his power, exactly. So when you're telling the others all of these stories with the same monuments that they're seeing it every day, it gives the whole difference.
Okay, Hisham, Damiata, of course, is one of the pioneering cities in Cairo in the Egyptian furniture. How is it considered as a precious Egyptian asset, and how can we develop its techniques to actually reflect our identity in the designs?
We are manufacturing more than 70 to
And is
80%.
do you have any relation with
Yeah, sure.
furniture?
Actually, I was selected to head a team of furniture designers.
Wow, that's amazing.
Because I'm also a furniture designer, and we're having a very good.
You are a French designer?
Furniture designer.
Really?
Yes, product and furniture designer, and I teach this in several universities around the world and also in Egypt. So we're working on this field, especially in Egypt, in order to enhance the power of Damietta, and we've made a lot of workshops to help people or the stakeholders of the industry in Damietta in order to export more furniture, because more than 70 to 80% of the furniture manufacturers or the furniture power in Egypt is in Damietta. So we wanted just to give them some more notes and more ways to export. Damietta is having its port, and it's having its own unique place on the map, because we're a hub in Egypt, so we can export easily to Europe. But firstly, we need to know the client segmentation, what the client
market
needs. Exactly. So if you want to export, for example, you need to understand the needs of your client, not to export
Exactly.
with the same way that
What you have. It's not
Exactly.
about what you have, it's about what the market needs.
Exactly. So
Okay, Hisham, sorry, Hala, if I interrupted. Do any foreign calibers are indulged in working in Damiata, or only purely Egyptian calibers that are working in this field?
okay, only Egyptian manufacturers. But what we're trying,
Manufacturers?
but what we're trying to do is to give the help of the experts in the field of production methods, which is very important. It's not all about the power of production; it's also the new production methods.
Only or design as well?
Both. But we're
We did
depending now
discuss
on
the
Egyptian designers. We brought some. That's why I was telling you the first project in Damietta Furniture City, the new one, was I was heading or leading a group of international furniture designers from Germany, from Greece, and from Egypt. And we give them a lot of details about the new trends in furniture design. Now we're trying to make it as Egyptian experiment, but also we're bringing some of Danish designers to Damietta. They're students of furniture design, and we brought our furniture designers from Egypt, and we make this kind of workshop, and we put them together in one of the famous factories in order to produce the new furniture. Their new designs, and it was a huge success in Egypt and in Denmark. by Egyptian designers, actually Damiettan designers, some of them. So there is a new soul in Damietta, not only to depend on the old trends or old styles, but to depend on the new styles that spreading all over the world.
Well, talking about Damietta, this brings me to talking about various types of art. So we're talking wood here, and if we're talking about the various forms of art that distinguishes Egypt in particular in terms of design, Egypt has a huge manpower in terms of art, crafts, and
Yes.
handmade products
Yes.
that involves wood,
Yes.
copper,
That's right.
other materials that are introduced in architectural
That's
and
right.
interior designs. How do you see that, and how can we maintain this? Because the introduction of machines actually, I mean, made
Yes.
like a downturn in
Yeah, you're
whatever
right.
is made by hand, which was very distinguishing in Egypt.
Yes,
So how
you're
can
right.
we maintain that?
Well, actually, the trend now is not like the old days with the mass production. Now we're having a new trend, which is helping us. I hope so. Which called this new trend. It's called the mass customization. So it's not about mass production; it's about mass customization. When you're going anywhere in Europe and trying to buy a new T-shirt from a famous brand, you will find this kind of a corner that's telling you if you want to customize it. So I will customize it for you, putting other stuff on the T-shirt or putting other stuff on your purse or whatever. And this, of course, for extra money. And here comes our opportunity in this. In mass customization, not only, of course, we have to depend on machinery, but also we have to depend on our manpower. So mass customization is the good solution for this, especially we're having very clever craftsmen. But also, on the other hand, we need to know the new techniques of production and new techniques of design that will help us more in production. So educating and giving the know-how to our manufacturers and making them on the same international pace of design worldwide, this will give the whole benefits. But stepping back and depending only on manpower, I think it will not help at all.
Mr. Hisham Essaawy, interdisciplinary designer and mentor. Of course, it was a pleasure to have you with us today.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you, Rana.
Informative knowledge, which we really appreciate.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you,
and,
Rana. Thank you, Hala.
Thank
It
you
was a
very
pleasure.
much, Mr. Hisham. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. A short break and we'll be right back.